What's going on, everybody? Welcome into this members only Q&A. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being members. Got about an hour to chat all things Packers here. Should get to about as many questions as you guys want to get to. See, there's already a good chunk of people in chat. See, there's already a bunch of questions in the chat, so we can get started right away. Obviously, a really interesting week from a Packers standpoint. A couple big signings, some departures with Josh Myers, Eric Stokes, A.J. Dillon, T.J. Slayton. And overall, some things expected, some things unexpected. So I'm sure a lot to dig into, but I will let you guys drive the ship today, and we'll go over anything that you guys want to go over. So we will get started right away with John. Andy, I know you have discussed it and it's still early, but I got to say I'm disappointed with the start of free agency so far. We have plenty of good players, but we need more great players. Unless a Hendrickson trade comes down, where are these great players coming from? I think it's extremely risky to go into the season banking on this draft class or current players. On the team making the jump to great players. While I know this year's free agent class wasn't great, it seems like a missed opportunity to truly improve the team. As far as the draft goes, I see the four major needs as edge, DT, field stretching, wide receiver, and corner. I'm hoping to trade down in one of the opening rounds to secure another day 2 pick and address all 4 spots by the end of the Friday night of the draft. John, I think it's an astute observation. We've talked about it a lot, a couple of the things that you discussed, right? Number one, that it felt like this was the offseason to go a little bit superstar shopping, if possible. We also talked about how it was a really bad season to go superstar shopping. The quote unquote stars that were out there went very fast. And I'm not sure how realistic some of those opportunities were for Green Bay. For example, Devontae Adams, we've talked about. I don't think you were going to get him off of that deal to LA. Not with something that would be anywhere near attainable for the Packers, that would be palatable for the Packers. I think it might have taken like 28, 30 million to get him to come to Green Bay, to not take that deal with the Rams because he wanted to be in LA. So that one I think would have been tough. I have no issue whatsoever in not giving up a 5-year, $150 million deal plus a second round pick for DK Metcalf. That is a exorbitant cost for a really good, really good, but arguably not upper echelon sort of wide receiver. If that's Jamar Chase, and I mean, obviously then I'm even willing to give more money and more draft picks or whatever. If that's a Justin Jefferson caliber player, even a CeeDee Lamb or something like that, I can understand. DK is really good. I just don't know that I can quite get to that level of justification. I probably would have been able to justify it if Green Bay did it. I don't know that I would have been super excited about it. And I can easily understand why they didn't do it. I mean, Milton Williams got a massive contract. A lot of the free agents that maybe Green Bay could have been interested in stayed with their own teams before they hit free agency. Chris Godwin is an example. Osa Odigizua is an example. You know, a Josh Sweat would have been something like they could have went with a Josh Sweat. As much as I like Josh Sweat and I would have been all for that move, you can make a pretty stern argument that if you're going quote unquote star hunting, well, Josh Sweat's not a star. He's really good, kind of in that DK Metcalf range. And again, you're going to pay massive money for him. Now, Green Bay paid massive money for Aaron Banks, and he's not a star. You can certainly argue that. So there's definitely a piece of that you have to sort of come to terms with as well. I think situation dictated a lot of this offseason. There's, to me, always 2 different ways that you can go about building a Super Bowl roster. All right. Number one is you have your stars that carry you. The Chiefs have been such a great example of this. Chris Jones, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, prior to that, Tyreek Hill. They have been a star-driven team. Some really good players on those teams too, from, like the Justin Reeds. Obviously, before that, Tyrann Mathieu, you could put in that star category as well when he was there. George Karlaftis is a good player. Trey Smith, maybe in that star category. Creed Humphrey, maybe in that star category. You can talk about some of those offensive linemen too, but their upper echelon players really drove them to Super Bowl wins. Green Bay's 2010, really good team, but you had Frank Zombo starting, you had Charlie Pepra starting, but this was a team that was driven by Aaron Rodgers, Clay Matthews, Charles Woodson, Nick Collins. I mean, a good chunk of stars on that team that elevated them to an entirely different level. I mean, the way that Woodson and Matthews were playing on defense was absurd. Rodgers was just coming into his, unbelievable stellar self. Like, they were driven arguably by stars. You see those type of teams all the time. There's also the teams, and I think the the previous Philly team that was quarterbacked by Nick Foles was a great example of this. Is not as many stars. I mean, Fletcher Cox was a star on that team, and I'm going to forget some people off the top of my head, but there were few stars that were on that team. But that was just a team that was good everywhere, that had just really good talent, that was tough to stop, and did not have a weak point. Like you were trying to find, I mean, if anything, it was probably Nick Foles, right? But they found even ways to supplement that. They just did not have a glaring weakness anywhere, and they could hang with anyone and they could beat anyone, and that's what they did. They had a really great offense. They had a really great defense, and it wasn't because of just one or two star players here or there. It was because everyone was good. Maybe Green Bay can build that team this way. And I think you already have what I would argue is some pretty big addition by subtraction. Josh Myers, my lowest graded player on offense this past year, gone. Eric Stokes, my lowest graded player on defense this past year, gone. One of my other lowest graded players on defense this past year, not somebody top of mind because he was gone midway through the year, but was Preston Smith, gone. Like they have taken a lot of the bottom of this roster and churned it out. And I think that's going to be a very net positive for Green Bay. In addition, you are now adding the more I've watched more Aaron Banks today, by the way. My now deeper dive into it, and this is not through green and gold tinted glasses or anything like that. Much more confident in the signing after watching him today. Some real superpower stuff that he's got in his disposal from a movement ability standpoint. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying that he's going to be a Pro Bowl, all pro caliber guard or anything like that, but I think you could make an argument that they found a Elton Jenkins as different types of players, but that sort of level of player in Aaron Banks. I think he can be in that category. Now, Elton's not been that Pro Bowl, all pro caliber player, but he's a really valuable piece, really good player. I think they found that caliber of player at left guard. Okay. So I think you might come close to replacing Elton with Elton at left guard, a similar caliber player, and now taking Elton and replacing Josh Myers, who has struggled for years, and replacing that with Elton. I think that's going to actually be a pretty significant upgrade on the offensive line. There'll be some hiccups. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but I do think they've actually made from Myers to Banks a pretty solid upgrade there. And then defensively, you are obviously adding another very versatile piece to this defensive backfield, something that they definitely needed. Gives them more depth, gives them a lot more just options of how they can mix and match in the defensive backfield. And the huge thing here is they haven't lost anything of substance. So this is a back-to-back playoff team. It's a team that struggled in big games last year, right? But they are they're still on the upward trajectory. They're like all their young players are still getting better. There's not anyone that's on that old range that's getting worse. I mean, if you would have had Brandon McManus in a couple of those earlier games last year, that might have helped in some of those games as well. That maybe could have even swung those games. Maybe if you've got a home game instead of an away game to start off, maybe things are different as well. And you're adding to this team. This is all a degree of spin. I'm not saying that it's perfect. I'm not saying that this is necessarily the offseason that I was hoping for Green Bay. But I'm saying there's still a lot of reasons to be optimistic. And if you're looking for glass half full optimism, I think there is enough there for you. And I'll add on top of it that this is a team that already has taken some players that have not been good for them, churned them out, added two good players to this football team, still has time to add a player or two via free agency, where like sometimes this is where Goody does his best work, is some of these value free agent signings. Like a lot of times they hit very successfully. Like they may not hit home runs on these, but they hit solid doubles a lot in value free agency period. And then you still have a full draft that's available to you as well. So they still have more avenues to upgrade this team, and you should see growth on this team. We didn't last year. It's worth pointing out we did not see last year. We saw more regression than progression this past year. So it's not a guarantee, but theoretically, you should see this team continue to grow in the right direction. So I understand that there is maybe some angst, frustration, or just a little bit of an empty feeling when you go in to an offseason expecting big things and knowing that they spent $120 million and looking at it like you got like, I don't know, maybe like a number 3 offensive lineman and, a solid, piece in the defensive backfield. And you're just left a little bit underwhelmed by that. I get it. But I do think you can look a lot of what Green Bay did and see the positive direction overall, and that this team is still green and growing and not ripe and rotten. And that's still a positive step. They're going to have to put it together. They're going to have to play better in big games. They're going to have to play better against division opponents. I'm hoping that last season was a wake up call to some of these younger players where this happens all the time, guys. You have success in year one as rookies or even second year players. You make a run that teams weren't expecting to. You go to the playoffs, you upset Dallas, and you take San Francisco to the brink. And everyone's talking about you like you are king of the hill, like you are the next big thing. And young players, especially, what do they start thinking? Oh, this isn't so hard. Like, man, that was easy. We can just go do that again, and we're going to even be better this year. And they take their foot off the gas a little bit. What happens? Everyone just takes a little bit of a step back. And in doing so, you go from a team that was everyone's darling and the surprise team to a team that disappointed a little bit. And I'm hoping that this past year was a wake-up call to those younger players that, hey, there is work that needs to be done here. I think Goody's conversation of urgency was a message to his young players, the coaches, everyone in the building, to say, I'll touch on that in a moment, but to say, hey, it is like, to quote Kevin Green here, it is time. It is time to take that step. And hopefully they do so. So a lot of time left. We're on March 13th, still like 6 months away from the very first regular season game. This roster can still change between now and then. Do I expect them to get a Trey Hendrickson or a big time premium player on this roster? Not necessarily. They are overdue to hit on a first round pick aggressively and get somebody like the Rams got with Jared Verse last year, just somebody that can come in and make that immediate impact. I'm crossing my fingers, especially a good karma draft being held in Green Bay. Maybe this can be the year they get an immediate impact player with that first round pick. But there's still a lot of reasons for optimism with this team, even if they didn't get those premium players that maybe we were hoping for. And just to go back to that urgency comment, I see a lot of people pointing out when Goody was talking about urgency, he wasn't talking about free agency. He was talking about inside the building, the people that are already there. Yeah, we all know that. But it doesn't ring as true if you as the GM aren't showing urgency. Now you can argue whether he showed it or not. Spending $120 million on two players is showing urgency. Whether they were the players you wanted or not is maybe a different definition of that. But he definitely did so by going out and spending that type of money on two players. My point would have been if he went out and did nothing, his call to the entire rest of the organization for urgency rings hollow if he just sits on his hands and knees and just says, you know what, I'm just going to go and draft some prospects and we're going to draft and develop like we always do. That would not have exuded urgency. So yes, we all know that he was talking about inside the building. It's just, if you want to practice what you preach and don't come across as you guys show urgency, I don't need to show urgency, then you need to put your money where your mouth is. And he did. Again, your mileage may vary as to what he did with that money, but he did definitely still go out and do that by going and signing two big free agents. All right. I know I spent a lot of time on John's questions there. I will get to everything, I promise you, but obviously that was a great way to start off things. I appreciate the question, John. Kipperoni 132. Any early questions here since may not make the live? On scale from 1 to 10, how do you rate the offseason so far? And do you think the Packers sometimes rely on potential of their players too much? Great question, Kipperoni. I'd give it a 6.5. 6.5 out of 10 so far. I think there are, as we talked about with John, some real positives that they've done, and I am a little bit higher on Banks after watching them. I still have to do the deeper dive on Hobbs, so I'll get there very soon as well and be able to talk a little bit more in depth about him in the near future. But I am overall, in the feeling that they added two good players to this team. They had great players. I think that's what's going to be left to know. And then as far as how they attack the draft and any other free agents that they might add, I love that they brought back Brandon McManus. I love the fact that they were willing to move on from Eric Stokes and Josh Myers, AJ Dillon, players that, when they played as of late, were not those players that you needed as impact players, right? So I think they moved on from players that they needed to, which does not always happen. Sometimes they hold on to players too long. They did not do that this time with Josh Myers, Eric Stokes. They recognized it was time to go in a different direction, which I appreciate. So I think that's a positive. I think, again, getting two good players in is still a net positive, maybe overpaying a little bit for Banks, but overall still a net positive and still have offseason to go. So 6.5 is where I would probably rank it. And then as far as whether the Packers sometimes rely on potential of their players too much, I don't think it's potential of their players. I think the Packers are very well versed in team building. One of the things that you can do as a general manager We see it in basketball all the time. We see it in football a decent amount, is to pay for a big name or somebody who's been really good in the league. And that sometimes can work out, but a lot of times you're paying huge dollars for what a player was, not what a player is going to be. Green Bay lives in the world of what players are going to be over the next 3 to 4 years, not what they were the last 3 to 4 years. And that goes for college scouting. That goes for their pro personnel department. That goes with how they sign free agents, how they sign, undrafted free agents, all of it. It's not what you've been. It's not what you were. It's not even necessarily what you are right now. It's what you're going to be over the next 3 to 4 seasons. And that's how Goody and this personnel staff and the scouting staff evaluate players. The hard part, the first part of that I should mention is that is a smart way to operate. You are trying to project what players are going to be, because just paying big money for what they did doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to carry over. Players fall off a cliff at a certain age in this league. If you're paying older players, you have to be very, very careful. If you're paying for name recognition, you have to be very, very careful. It's great that they maybe made Pro Bowls. It's great that they might be a 95 overall in Madden. It's great that their PFF grade might be in the 80s, whatever that might be. It doesn't necessarily always equate to what they're going to be over the next 2 to 3 years. You should want to pay for what a player is going to be, not what they have been. That being said, that is also sometimes a tougher world to live in, because projection is very, very difficult. These are human beings. These are not always projectable robots that you can just chart over time, or it's not like, again, you can input into a system and automatically calculate out what a player is going to be. There is, literal projection that goes on with this. This is not a scientific thing. This is years of scouting and watching players and saying, hey, this is what generally works, and we think this is going to work in the future, and this is how we think they're going to trend in the right direction. And that can be, like I said, a very difficult thing. I think sometimes Green Bay can live too much in that realm. And I know when people even say prospect or projection with the Green Bay Packers, there's almost like this, they get itchy. They're like, I don't need another LVN. I don't need another whatever it might be. Like, I don't need another Eric Stokes. I don't need another, even Rashawn Gary, whatever you want to say. Like, these guys are going to take 2 or 3 years and may or may not turn out. I understand it. Trust me, I do. But I think it's a net positive overall. That's the world that they live in. I think, and this is an ideal scenario, I get it, but I think I would like to see them live a little bit more in the Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs realm. I get you can't just do that, and those guys aren't always available, but guys that not only are good now, but also project well moving forward. It's an ideal situation. Those guys we talked about and weren't necessarily out there this year. And even if you do, a lot of times you have to pay an exorbitant cost for them. They got, I think, relatively lucky with the costs of McKinney and Jacobs a season ago. So I do think there's probably a little bit of a piece to that, but I love their overarching philosophy. I think they can execute it a little bit better. I think sometimes they can get a little bit too cute. And I think maybe Aaron Banks is sort of a poster child for that, in the fact of, hey, there were players out there that were maybe a little bit better established that also should age well over the next 3 to 4 years, that we've already seen play at a high level. And maybe Banks is that projection. I think Dio Dengbo is somebody that we talked about on the defensive side that was sort of that. Aaron Banks is kind of the offensive version of that, of like, the flashes are fantastic. You just want to see a bit more consistency. But if he starts playing consistent, it's like, look the heck out. You're probably looking at a Pro Bowl caliber player. And I think sometimes they get a little bit too cute in that regard. But I think the overarching philosophy is a good one. Can they execute it better? Yes, especially from a draft standpoint, especially with first round picks. And I like the fact that they're trying to project that out. Just know sometimes that can have its upsides. It can also have its downsides. And yeah, I'll just kind of leave it at that. It's a tough business to live in. I think they get a lot of stuff right. They certainly get some stuff wrong. On their pro personnel side, they've got a lot of stuff right, which is why even if you're not maybe huge on Hobbs or Banks, like, I'm more than willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, because they've been really, really, really good on the pro personnel side. All right. 305, Mike McGee. Andy, I may be in the minority, but I'm very happy with the offseason. I won't be disappointed until Goody drafts a player at 54 with a unanimous 6th round grade and says we gave him a 1st round grade. A lot of ball game left, as Aaron Nagler would say, Mike. So there's plenty of time for that still. But I appreciate the optimism. I'm optimistic still because the draft can change our fortunes with the right picks. My board from last season had Haddon 5th round, Oladapo or Trey Taylor 6th, and Taylor, Omar Brown, or Jennings in the 7th. And this draft, instead of safety, we need line help and wide receivers. And I love the day 3 and UDFA options so much more than last year. And we typically do well with linemen who are late round selections. Green Bay is going to have a lot of opportunities still to upgrade this team. Only 8 draft picks, as Goody would say, for now. Maybe they trade some away. Maybe they get a Trey Hendrickson. I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe they utilize those picks. Maybe they move down and end up with 10 or 12 picks, but they'll get plenty of bites at the apple, as Brian would like to say, or, swings at the plate, whatever you want to call it. And hopefully still upgrade this team in a major way. But Mike, I love and appreciate the optimism. John, love today's show in the 2021 draft. One thing on Trey Smith, though, he had medical issues prior to the draft, some questions about blood clotting. I believe the Chiefs medical staff had some inside knowledge. He was probably off the Packers board, but that late in the draft, is it worth the risk? So I'm glad you brought that up. That is something I probably should have covered today in that specific selection. And it just kind of goes back to, and he very likely was off their board for that reason. Which is understandable. They go through that funnel, and if the medical team, I've actually talked to somebody on their staff in specific about this, and if the medical team says no, Goody literally usually just listens to him and says, "We're good. We're gonna take him off the board." Like, he apparently has a very high level of trust for what the medical team does with the information, and if they say stay away, he stays away. So that easily could have been the case. So I'm glad that you did bring that up. It seems like the signings had a lot to do with which players were willing to sign 4-year deals. I get the cap reasons, but what signings do you think Goody might have made if it wasn't a concern? It's a really tough thing to say, John. I don't know that they would have missed on anyone specifically. There were certainly other players who got 4-year deals as well. Let me see if I can pull this up really quick here. So Will Freeze signed a 5-year deal. Milton Williams signed a 4-year deal. Dan Moore, Aaron Banks, Josh Sweat, Cam Bynum, and Nate Hobbs. So there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players who signed 4 or 4-year or longer deals. 2 of them were Packers, Hobbs and Banks. But Josh Sweat and Milton Williams were both out there that signed 4-year deals. Again, it's tough to say. Maybe some of those guys who signed 3-year deals would have preferred 4-year deals, especially with the way that Green Bay structures it. It's really tough to know for sure. So I don't know that it changed anything. Maybe these were the 2 guys they were targeting. Maybe they were targeting some of the other guys and other players who were like, no, I want a 2 or 3-year deal. It's just really tough to gauge exactly without knowing the inner workings of what Green Bay was working on with some of those agents and potential free agents. The 2 positions where the Packers need a true number 1 were edge and wide receiver. Can't draft both in round 1 and can't expect a number 1 from the draft. Certainly after round 1, wish they would have filled one in free agency. Yeah, I'm sure they probably would have liked to as well. The wide receiver one was always tricky. I mean, we've been through that. There's really only 2, DK and Devontae. And again, we touched base on that at the beginning. Just don't know that there was any. I don't know that you can be too upset over what transpired there because, again, I don't think you were getting Devontae off of LA, and the Metcalf price was extraordinary. So, and then there just wasn't another number 1 wide receiver out there. And I think that made it very difficult. So I think Green Bay's doing what they can I think they will do what they can to supplement that as best as possible. But, there's more than one way to build a team. And I think Green Bay still is enough at wide receiver if they build the rest of the team the right way. And they can still find wide receivers, maybe whether it's during cutdown times or some wide receiver will get disgruntled or there'll be guys that are available at the trade deadline. So it's not out of the question yet that they still couldn't upgrade that at some point this year. Defensive end, again, they probably could have got Josh Sweat, but maybe he wanted to go play for his former defensive coordinator and wanted Arizona over Green Bay. Like, you could understand a world where that was the case. Milton Williams got a massive contract. Odigizua signed with Dallas before he could get out. Myles Garrett and Max Crosby did not become available. Khalil Mack stayed with his team. That edge rusher position didn't actually end up being as impressive as it looked like at one point. There's still one out there, of course, in Trey Hendrickson. Maybe Green Bay makes the move, maybe they don't, but I think that was also probably a tougher one to kind of upgrade than what it looked like initially when we went into free agency, because a lot of the guys that were maybe on the trade block or again, Odigizua and who's the other? Oh, Khalil Mack stayed with their own teams. That makes it a lot tougher. The Packers' edge draft preferences are odd. At other positions, they focus on the passing game, but at edge, the team selects larger players who can't turn the corner and don't have pass rush chops. I wouldn't necessarily define it that simply, John. I know what you mean by it. They want players who can not only set the edge as run defenders, but also collapse the pocket, bull rush, and hang with those defensive linemen and go toe to toe with them. So it's not just that they're looking at somebody who can't rush the passer or that they prioritize run defense. They just are looking for the bigger edge defenders who not only can be physical in the run game and hang in that regard, but also that can collapse that pocket. Because a lot of times, if you've got that one speed rusher, by the way, that gets immediately up the field, well, that's great. But they just abandon that spot. And how many times, like Rashawn Gary will do that at time, or at least he did. He did a much better job of it this past year. You get that speed rusher that comes up the field, the tackle just kind of works him around the bend a little bit, or just gives him that one final push at the end. What does the quarterback do? Quarterback steps in the pocket. Now you've got a guy that's behind you. You're now playing 11 on 10 for all intents and purposes. And you've got a spot on the defensive line that's open. Quarterback steps up into the pocket in that direction and now has time to throw. And if it's to the right side where they're going to their dominant side, now all of a sudden that speed rusher's behind. You can step to your right. You've got all day to throw. You've got the whole vision of the field, and you have the ability to make those big plays down the field. So listen, I love a good speed rusher, especially as a change of pace. I wish Green Bay would have a player on their roster. And I get they don't like the platoon or like the, you've got to be able to do everything. And I understand that. I think on a 53-man roster, plus with multiple practice squad call-ups every single week, especially last year, they kept 6 defensive ends. I promise you, Goody, you can keep one of those as a speed rusher. And I would love that just as a change of pace. Usually an offensive tackle has a weakness. Sometimes that weakness is power. Sometimes that weakness is speed. Sometimes that weakness is technique. There's going to be something different for every offensive tackle. And you want to be able to throw a player at that offensive tackle that is going to give them problems. If you've got a slow lumbering right tackle or left tackle that struggles to get out of your stance, and you've got a speed rusher coming off the edge, that's a nice piece to have in those scenarios, especially in obvious passing down. So I'm not ever asking Goody to be perfect. I always want to understand the philosophy. In this situation, I can understand it. He wants players that can do a little bit of everything, that can rush the passer and can stop the run. If you have injuries and all of a sudden you have to, go with one of these guys, it's not like, well, they're only a pass rusher only, and now you have to have them in on rundowns and they can't hold up at the point of attack. I do think there should be a little bit more room for, wiggle room for maybe a player like that. Again, on a 53-man roster plus 16-man practice squad, but I can at least understand his justification for why he wants to do it that way. And that's all I ask. Like that, not that it matters anyway, but that I can at least understand why they're doing it that way. And again, you can still have a very good passer. Jared Verse is a great example of that from the Rams this past year. He's a good run defender. He's not a speed guy around the edge, but he will collapse the pocket on you all day long. And that is just as annoying for a quarterback. So I'm fine with the overarching philosophy. Again, it has less to do with the philosophy and just finding guys that can do it effectively. Rashawn Gary, for the most part, has been able to do it effectively. LVN has not. LVN is that speed to power guy, collapse the pocket guy who is yet to be able to do that at a high enough level. So philosophy is fine, but you got to find the guys that can execute it. LVN has not. Rashawn Gary, for the most part, has. And that's kind of the difference there. So that's how I would look at that. Who did you like at safety better, Anderson or Oladapo? That's a great question. I liked both actually quite a bit. I thought both looked like starting caliber safeties when they were in. No, very, very small sample size. And with additional playing time, maybe teams pick on them a little bit more, but I actually liked both. And I thought both looked like starting caliber safeties. So it's a really nice problem to have. They have no need at safety whatsoever. I mean, you've got Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney as what I think are your clear starters. Javon Bullard can move back there if you need him to. And then Oladapo and Zane Anderson can both play teams, and both are like what I thought were starting caliber safeties this past year. Add on top of that, that Oladapo might be able to move into maybe some hybrid linebacker roles at some point in his career. And then add on top of that, that even Omar Brown was a nice little special teams piece that looks like a, number 4 or 5 safety on most teams. They're good at safety. That's a very exciting position for Green Bay. All right, lots of questions. I'll again try to get to as many as I can. I know I went through some heavy lifting on some early ones here. We sat here in another Q&A and I dropped the name Amari Cooper and you scoffed, rightfully so. Presumably at a bargain at this point. Have your thoughts changed? Not as a needle mover, just as a flyer. it's really funny that you bring this up. Justice Mosqueda, we've got this little group chat going, and Justice Mosqueda sent me a file today. And he did this on defensive ends the other day. So I'm going to move my ring light for a while so I can see this. He sent me a file today. And honestly, I swear to you, on my to-do list today, Love and Football, was to go and watch Amari Cooper and to kind of rewatch him and be like, all right, is there something I'm missing here? Can he come and help Green Bay? And what would he potentially bring to the table if Green Bay went in that direction? Well, Justice put this together, and this is, let's see, how did he group this? So he did this by like yards per route, and then like, which players were open, which were not open, and like he's got all these basically advanced metrics in a file, and he put like all wide receivers, so all 158 wide receivers that were eligible for this. So he just did like a phenomenal job of this. By the way, Romeo Dobbs was number 16 on this list, by the way. Then he did which ones were free agents and which ones, or basically which ones were available, right? And there were how many people here? 30 that were either on the team already or available in free agency. And based on the metrics that he put together, out of 100 and what was it? 100 and sorry, give me 1 second. Out of 158 eligible, Amari Cooper was 145 on the list of just being able to get open, yards per route run, yards after catch, all of it. Like you put the advanced metrics all together in one just like beautiful, basically all-encompassing metric. And Amari Cooper was 145 out of 158 wide receivers. So this to me, and I think that was, I don't know if that was, it was just 2024. So just 2024. I had plans on going back and watching Amari again, and then I saw that. By the way, Cooper Kupp was at the same spot, tied with Amari Cooper as well. The top available one on the list, number 3, was Stephon Diggs. And then, let's see, Tim Patrick of Detroit was actually up there at number 28. De'Ami Brown was 46. He obviously signed already. But yeah, like the actual available wide receivers were very, very low on this list. And obviously we know Stephon Diggs is hurt. So no, I'm going to stick with, based off of what I saw previously, based off of what I looked at, and then based off of Justice's numbers, I have no real interest in Amari Cooper. Regarding the 2021 draft, COVID extended eligibility made it historical low on talent, and Trey Smith had blood clot issues in college, which scared teams, but it's still a poor draft largely because Goot didn't go after the RAS guys. Do you think he went even stronger for the athletes afterwards because of 2021? No, because he was already doing that beforehand as well. Again, I'm sure there were some lessons learned off of that draft and what went wrong and what, potentially could, he could have done better. But no, I don't think he necessarily learned just from 2021. And again, I think that's kind of the frustrating part of 2021 is there were some of those premium athletes like Nico Collins and Creed Humphrey that were available. And unfortunately, he passed on both of them. And I do agree with the blood clot issue for Trey Smith. And again, should have definitely brought that up yesterday. Random, who did we end up picking with the pick we acquired for Cole Van Landen? Does that move the needle of the 2021 draft class? I'd have to go back and look at that a little bit better. I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, so what, 2022 NFL draft? I can probably find this actually pretty quick. I think it was a 7th rounder. Maybe it was a 6th rounder. Give me one more second. I got a 7th rounder for Kadar Hallman in that one in 228. Yeah, I don't know which one this would have been. Gonna try one more thing here. Well, it would have been via Jacksonville. Now I'm just very intrigued if I can find this. Chicago via Houston, Detroit, Denver. Maybe it was the 2023 draft. Boom. 242. Anthony Johnson Jr. is who they got with that pick. No, it does not help anything whatsoever. So that was Anthony Johnson Jr. is who they ultimately got from the Cole Van Landen trade. Do you think we got anything else in that for anyone else in that draft class? 2020. So let's see. 2021, they did not get anything for Stokes or Myers. They didn't get any. I don't think they traded Amari, did they? I think that was a release. Yeah, he was released. So Amari was released. Newman was claimed by Tampa, so no trade there. Slayton, they didn't get anything. Shamar Jean Charles, I don't think was a trade. Shamar was a release. And then Van Landen was a trade. McDuffie, they still have. Hill was a release. So no, they didn't get anything else from that draft class in any sort of trade. So Anthony Johnson Jr. was the only one for the Cole Van Landen pick. And obviously they got a year out of him, right? And that was about it. If you had to bet on Rodgers watch, who do you got? I'm not saying this just for the sake of saying this. I have this weird feeling that he's actually going to legitimately end up in Minnesota. There's been this really weird vibe around Minnesota this entire time of like not exactly wanting to go with McCarthy. There's been a little bit of talk of like, would they reunite with Cousins somehow? I don't know that it's going to be Russell Wilson in Minnesota. There's really no other veterans available. Like, I guess they could maybe go Flacco. I don't know. Like, I still think like the fact that Rodgers is taking his time, and I know everyone's looking at New York and Pittsburgh. I think he either ends up in Pittsburgh or Minnesota. If I were betting, I would probably still put money on Pittsburgh, but like there is a weird gut feeling that I have that he actually does legitimately end up in Minnesota. So we'll see. That's crazy that you had mentioned possibly trading for Jalen Hyatt in one of your videos a day ago, because I was seriously thinking the same thing. Not sure how much interest Green Bay would have. I don't think so. He's not their type at all. I mean, not even remotely. Like he might be like 175 pounds dripping wet. But I would be for it just as a field stretcher and just see if like, New York screwed something up. You're probably getting him for like a 6th round pick at this point. So take the flyer on him. I probably would, but I don't necessarily see Green Bay being the team that ultimately gets him. Randy, member for 12 months. That is awesome. Really appreciate the kind words there. And it is a blast to do. So I'm glad that you're liking it. And thank you again for being a member. Rasheed Walker has been a salary cap cheat code the last 2 years, but is he worthy of a second contract at the going market prices? If not, should Goot trade him with a cheap year left? I am hardcore against the trade Rasheed Walker. I don't know, movement, if you will. You cannot have enough of these offensive linemen. You just can't. Even if you only get 1 year of them left. I mean, what's probably the most that you're getting for Rasheed? A third? I mean, at most, I don't think any team's giving up more than a third. And I think they maybe get a third. Maybe like, I think that feels right? Like, it wouldn't stun me if it was a fourth. So I think it's probably somewhere in that 3rd to 4th range, and that might be aggressive. So again, if it's a third, I'm not taking it. I'm going to stick with Rasheed, because also he might end up being my starting left tackle for the next few years. He might end up actually staying. I'm not giving up on that yet. I'm not giving up on him now. I like Rasheed. I think he's a good player. I mean, we're seeing Dan Moore go for $15 million per year. And yes, it means that Rasheed's going to go for a good chunk of money as well. But no, I'm not giving up on Rasheed this year. I think you need him on this team to be able to compete at a high level. Even if he ends up your swing tackle, even if Jordan Morgan starts at left tackle and Sean Ryan starts at right guard, you're going to need Rasheed this year. So I am hardcore against trading him. I don't think you get enough in return. If some team calls and offers like a first, yeah, I'm taking it. If they offer a second, I probably take it. I think I probably would for a second. I don't think you get either of those things. I think you maybe get a third. And I just don't want to trade offensive line depth at all. I think it's a great thing to have. And I think moving on from it, even if you might lose him next year, if he signs a big contract, you probably get a 4th round comp pick in the future. So to take a third now and to undercut your your offensive line now to go from a third round pick, or a fourth round pick in 2027 for a third round pick in 2026, or I guess, sorry, fourth round pick in 2020, yeah, seven for a third round pick in 2025. It's not worth it enough for me. So that's, I would not, but I can understand at least what you're thinking, but to me, it would be a hard no. Any more thoughts on Bank? I saw some criticism bringing him in and having Meyer sign for so little elsewhere. I disagree with those criticism and think it was still the right move all in all. Yeah, again, I watched him more, like him a lot more than I did on my initial watch. And again, it's not just rose tinted glasses. It's literal just more opportunity to watch it with a more discerning eye rather than just going through it ultra fast when he first signs with the team. So the more I watch, the more that I like. He's got some legitimate superpowers. The plan is to do more of a deep dive on him tomorrow. So we'll see if I can hopefully get that done. But yeah, overall, he's definitely an upgrade from Myers. You can understand the conversation at least of what's better, Banks at 77 million on 4-year deal, or Myers on a 1-year 3.5. But was it somebody in this chat earlier who talked about like, hey, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and Josh Myers was very clearly the weakest link. And so yeah, I understand that thinking. And listen, for any of you who've been here long enough, which you guys are all members, you probably have been. You guys know I am not a Myers guy at all. So again, Banks is an extraordinary contract. Like, that is a big contract. I'm not sure that would have been within my purview of what I maybe would have given up in that scenario. And I think the only reason it's a conversation is because Myers went for so cheap and Banks went for so much. But there's no question at all that Banks is very clearly the better player in that situation. Do you see a scenario where Brian trades up in the draft? Maybe some urgency is needed with a lot of pass rushers projected to go high. Sure. Absolutely could see that. It's going to take the right player. I don't think it would be anything more than moving up from like 23 to like 15. I think 15 is probably about the ceiling you'd be looking at there. But if the right player fell to that range and Goody fell in love with somebody, could absolutely see them going in that direction. I think it's more likely he trades down, but not completely out of the question that he could trade up. John, appreciate that. We are all members here, so everyone should be subscribed already, I would think. And I do appreciate the likes, though, because this does go live to everyone once we're done. Holy crap, you guys got a lot of questions today. I'm at the trade for Hendrickson or bust at this point. Anyone else? I really want them to go get Hendrickson. We all know how this is going to go. Trey Hendrickson's not going to be a Green Bay Packer. You know it in your heart. I know it in my heart. I want it to happen. I try to speak it into existence. Maybe I'm going to go out and pray to the blood moon tonight. That something can happen, but I think we all know how this is going to end. Be interesting to see how MVS does in Seattle. It's going to be interesting to see how Seattle does in general. I mean, just what they've done with that team. It is a very, very interesting season for them upcoming. They kind of nuked that thing a little bit. So I'm very interested to watch them. All things considered, I'm glad that Tay ended up in LA as opposed to another NFC team. Yeah, I mean, I wish he would have ended up with the Chargers, right? I think that would have been better, but yeah, I mean, Rams are a good team. That's going to be a very competitive team when Green Bay plays against them, or if they play against them. I don't remember if they play against them in the regular season, but either way, that's a very good football team. They're going to be a tough out if Green Bay plays them in the playoffs. The Adebo to the Giants was weird and unfortunate to me. Yeah, they gave him a big contract, very big contract, but good for him coming off an injury, getting 18 mil per year on a 3-year deal. That's a really good deal. I have no real issue that Green Bay didn't try to outbid that or anything. And, that's a really good payday for him. I don't think it really has anything to do with reaching out to Hobbs. I don't think they keep him. I talked to Rob Demovsky on the Pack-A-Day radio show today, and he said that from his understanding, his reporting is that people in the Jair Alexander camp are expecting that he is going to get released or traded and are frankly shocked he hasn't been released or traded as of yet. So I still think this ends in a divorce, but weirder things have happened. I've said all along, I will be surprised if Jair Alexander is a Packer. I will not be stunned or shocked or fall out of my chair or like, oh my God, we never could have seen this coming. I think there's still that possibility out there. But if I were betting on it, I would definitely still say he does not end up a Green Bay Packer this year. For Trey's price to drop, and it's not worth the first and 30 million plus a year for an over 30-year-old, not worth it till the price comes down to a third. I'd be fine with like second for Trey Hendrickson plus like sixth. I'll do it for a second right now. Second for Hendrickson, I'm all in, all day, every day. Green Bay is looking ahead as they give these deals out. They are making a window, not trying to cash in for a 1-year shot. I think that's true. I think there was an opportunity to do a little bit of both, where they could have kind of gone a little bit more all in without really mortgaging the future, because they did just spend $120 million. But I do think there is some truth to probably what you're saying, King Kermit. We'd be in cap hell like the Saints if Green Bay did all the things some of you want. Some to some extent, but again, they spent $120 million this offseason. They found ways to do that. I think it's more to do with who they signed rather than, whether or not they should have done more than that. And they can still go out and sign, one more player too. Again, I'm not expecting it to be a $35 million Trey Hendrickson. They can do it if they want to. I'd expect it to more be a, I don't even know who's out there at this point that would make a ton of sense, but probably a value free agent signing or two, but anything is still possible for them. No GM is perfect, but the way Goody operates is insanely intelligent, and I refuse to slander his name, calling this offseason a bust because we didn't sign or trade for a ridiculously expensive player. That's good, good philosophy, King Kermit, and I appreciate the positivity. I think there's always some reasons to be critical, right? Goody's not perfect. Matt's not perfect. This team is not perfect. There are things that Goody needs to do better, specifically first round picks. There's no two ways around it. He needs to do better with his first round picks. And, that is something he can really improve upon. There's things that Matt can do better. There's things that this team can do better. It's a flawed team, as every team is, and you're always looking for ways to grow and get better. I think Green Bay is in a very strong position with their brain trust with Goody, Russ Ball, and Matt LaFleur overall. I think there are things that you can be critical of all of them. I think if you are being honest, you understand that they are all doing some really good work and making this team a very competitive team. I understand the push from people to say, I'm done with competitive teams. I want a Super Bowl. You and all other franchises, my friend, and all other fan bases. It's a tough thing. It's a very tough thing. There's a lot of smart minds out there. There's a lot of really good franchises doing some really good things, and you've got to be the best at it. You've got to beat out 31 other franchises. And I think overall, they're putting this team in a position to succeed. I think even since 2020, I think they've had, at least 2, if not 3 teams that have been capable of, winning. 2020 had a real chance to win the Super Bowl. 2021's roster was good enough. The team definitely did not play well enough come playoff time, but the roster was more than good enough to win a Super Bowl. They had 2 at least Super Bowl winning caliber teams. Yeah, I don't think anyone's necessarily saying 23 or 24 were Super Bowl caliber. Certainly 2022 was not. But they were teams that were trending in the right direction overall, even if 2024 took a step back. And now it's how do you get back into that conversation, right? So that's what people are looking for, is getting back into, you can't go 1-5 in the division. You can't lose your first playoff game, and you've got to find a way to get over that hump and be competitive and be that team that can win a Super Bowl. Don't think Green Bay has been quite there yet in the Jordan Love era. And now I think people were looking for it to get to that. We'll see if they can do that. But now the onus is going to be on, everyone in that franchise to have the urgency to get to that level and play at that Super Bowl caliber level this upcoming season. People need to lose the mindset of winning now. We all want that, but you can't hamstring yourself for 1 year. Goody is handling it correctly. Agreed. I do think also there's a time and a place. I think it is very difficult if you never pull that lever and say, now's the time. And the reason that I say that is just about every year, there's going to be 3, 4, 5 teams that pull that lever and say, now's the time. And there's risk that comes with that. No doubt about it. But there's also risk that comes with never doing it. You don't want to pull that lever more than you need to. You need to find the way to pull it at the right time. But I would argue that both, let's just say in the 30 years of Favre and Rodgers, there needed to be more of that urgency. There needed to be more times where Green Bay said, we're going to make a real run at this thing, and we're going to do it right now because we have the team to do it. In 2014, if they just go a little bit more all in and make one more move, does Green Bay have a Super Bowl? If 4th and 26, Green Bay just goes a little bit more all in, do they have another Super Bowl? Maybe. So I think there is a time and a place to do that. I don't think you want to utilize it a lot, but I also think there's a risk in never doing it, because then you become the bridesmaid and never the bride. And you need to be the bride at some point. Not you specifically, but not you, Derek. But the Packers, they need to be the champion team. So there is always risk in it. Sometimes no risk it, no biscuit. King Kermit, horrible free agent class, especially for our needs. Fantastic draft for our needs. However, in Good I trust, I certainly couldn't do it better from my couch. That's for sure. You never know until you try, King Kermit. You never know until you try. Thank you, Derek. This team has lost something of substance. The Watson injury is a killer. That's true, John. That's a very true statement. Um, Hopefully they can get that back at some point. I don't know that they're ever going to truly get it back. Also, they live without Christian Watson for about 5, 6, 7 games a season, so they know how to handle it. And I think we all know that they have to find some sort of deep threat at some point here. They can't exist without that. And I'm willing to still give Goody and friends the benefit of the doubt that they're going to find somebody who can stretch the field a little bit, even if they haven't done it yet. So still giving them a little bit of that benefit of the doubt there. Watson injury is severe, makes us need wide receiver where we didn't need it the same way before. Plenty in the first couple of rounds of the draft to help. I love Higgins so far, to be honest. But to be honest, if Wicks could catch the ball, he legitimately be a top 30 wide receiver in the league. The route running and separation is so good. Wish he could block a little bit better, though. It's actually not. I would actually disagree with that last part, King Kermit. I actually like him. How did PFF grade him as a blocker? Because I actually like him as a blocker. He gives a lot of really good effort. Yeah, he's actually one of their top graded run blocking wide receivers as well. I was gonna say, I've graded him very well as a run blocker. So yeah, they have him up there too. In fact, I wonder if just looking at grades for them, receiver run block, Wicks is their 4th highest run blocking wide receiver, behind only Juwan Jennings, Puka Nacua, and Tylan Wallace. Wicks is number 4. So no, he's very good at it. Like I actually did a double take at the end of that one. So no, he's a very, very good run blocker. In fact, this is obviously saying it too, but I would have argued best run blocker on the team. I know Malik Heath gets some credit for it, and Watson's a good run blocker. Melton's actually a good run blocker, but I would actually argue best run blocker on the team. 100% correct. These dudes need to step up. Most are 3 years or more in the league. Got to prove your worth. Dan O'Donohue loved the 2021 draft review episode. Appreciate that, Dan. They're still trying to make up for that one. I think weirdest thing is how fixated they seem to be on Amari when they don't typically do that. Lesson learned. Absolutely lesson learned. Jaden Reed is their lesson learned. And in fact, I give Goody a lot of credit. They could have looked at a small, undersized slot receiver again in Jaden Reed and been like, well, we're not doing that again. We just screwed up Amari. And I think instead they learned their lesson and looked at some of the positives that Jaden had that Amari did not. And I think they obviously made a much better decision with Jaden Reed in that situation than they did with Amari. And I think very much lesson learned in that situation. Banks is a dog when you watch the tape. Hobbs is the best outside, isn't the best outside, but I trust Halfley. Okuda went 3rd overall because of what Halfley did with him. Look at him since, worth a vet minimum contract. Maybe I don't see them going in that direction, but with the experience there in Halfley's defense, something that they could look at, but not necessarily something that I would expect. But great point about how Halfley could make it work in this specific system. Looking at a pick of all the last year's linemen, Ryan is thick compared to the others. Glad they got a similar guy in Banks. Love that physicality. Totally agreed, Brandon. I'm really excited about the potential interior of Ryan, Banks, and Elton Jenkins playing together if it ends up being those 3 specifically in the interior. Any chance you can get Mike Wall to stop by and give us his opinion on Banks? I'm hoping to. I already reached out to him for a radio hit next week, and then I'm going to try to get him on the podcast the week after that. I've got a vacation coming up, so I'm probably going to do a string of guests, and just off the top of my head, hoping to try to get Ben Fennell on, Mike Wall, probably Nagler, and maybe 1 or 2 others as well. So we'll probably do a string of guests coming up for that time where I need to record in advance, and I'm going to be on vacation for about a week. Ryan and Banks are going to give Jacobs some full-blown landing strips of space to run through, and Jacobs devours that first contact, about to get 7 yards of run. I am excited about what he could bring to this run offense. No question about it. Mike Wall's opinion would be awesome on what he thinks we should do on the O-line this year. I know he posted out a block party, by the way. So out on his channel, he did cover the signing of Banks. So definitely go check that out. Cannot recommend Mike's stuff enough, but we'll hope to have him on at minimum on the radio show next week. But if not there, or even if they're going to try to get him on the pod as well. How do players who get cut after camp with no guarantees get paid, and how does it count against the cap? Surely they get something right. How do players who get cut after camp with no guarantees get paid, and how does it count against the cap? Yeah, so they do, like, certain players, I believe, do get some sort of like stipends during training camp that I don't think count against the cap. I'd have to look into that a little bit more, but no, their contract is to make the team. So yeah, like that's what the contract is. Again, I do think during training camp, I do think there is some pay that these players get while trying out and things like that. And I'd have to really look into that. But because I've said this before and I'll say it again, I want all these players to get paid, but I'm not super looking into what the paychecks are for the players. Like I care about what it counts against the cap, and all I know is that stuff does not count against the cap. Do you use PFF or PFR because Banks has 90 pressures allowed PFF versus 60 over the last 3 years? I tend to use PFF a little bit more for that stuff. The grades for PFF are very subjective, and take them for what it's worth. Their tracking stuff is really, really good. And when they say that every NFL team uses PFF, that's the stuff that the teams use. It's not the grades per se. I'm sure they glance at it or whatever, but it is far more the tracking data, and PFF's really, really, really good at that stuff. Travis's numbers only mean so much. Some don't do half sacks, some don't, etc. There's no standard for stat tracking. Agreed, but that's why, again, I think PFF does a great job with that part of it. What do you like for mock draft analysts that you may follow? Who do I like? Daniel Jeremiah, Bob McGinn, etc. Who's the best? Mike Mayock. I go to Daniel Jeremiah for a lot of that stuff. And I don't really actually for mock drafts, I don't care about mock drafts at all. I don't care who gets it right or what gets it wrong. The only reason I look at mock drafts is to scroll to pick 23 and to see who's projected to be available at pick 23. I don't care who they have going anywhere else. It doesn't matter. It's not going to happen anyway. Like most people get maybe like 6, 7, 8 picks right in their mock drafts, like even the good ones. That just doesn't bother me. So I don't ever look at mock drafts to see, what any of these analysts are thinking of who's actually going to end up where, because nobody knows. I do like looking to see and going through it and be like, oh, who does this mock have available at pick 23? Oh, if that were the case, this is what I hope Green Bay does. That's my only reason for really using mock drafts. Yes, mock draft Monday though. Ross Uglum is your go-to, of course. King Kermit, thank you for that shout out. Ross does an awesome job. So happy to have him here on the team. Given the contracts given out for starting caliber linemen, do you think the Packers can and will keep Walker or Ryan in addition to Tom? And if they do, would that be the end of Jenkins? I think all of those decisions will be taken individually. I don't think they'll look at them as a group sort of, decision. I think they'll take each of them and look at Rasheed Walker. What does he want? Is he worth that amount? Can they bring him back? What kind of salary cap space do they have, etc.? They'll do the same with Jenkins if they want to bring him back or if they want to save the $20 million. They'll look at Sean Ryan and what he can potentially get. My guess is Tom is back. I think Elton will be back on some sort of extension or restructure or something. I think they'll get him back as well, depending on how he plays this year. And then I would guess that either Ryan or Walker are back. But not both of them. I think they'll move on from one of those players next year, would be my guess. Why do you think Packers didn't get Josh Sweat next year? Cap figure seems Packers over the cap. He didn't want to come, or Gary plays his spot, which would make it redundant. Tough to say. It's tough to know if Green Bay even had interest. He may have wanted to go play in Arizona with his old defensive coordinator in Gannon and go play there. There's a lot of different reasons. Maybe Green Bay was offering $5 million less per year. It's just, those are the really tough things to say, where we don't even know if Green Bay had interest. We don't know what they offered. We don't know if Sweat wasn't even interested in Green Bay. Without knowing that stuff, it's really tough to say. But, if I had the choice personally between Banks or Sweat at the same contract, I would have gone Sweat in that situation. But like I said, I did go back and watch a lot of Banks today and came away a lot more excited than I was when I did my initial watch through. The optimism should be there. This past season was a success and many played below expectations. I don't see the huge reason for making such a splash. Fellas got to step up and be potential. I think if anything, if you're feeling that things are still trending in the right direction, you can actually make an argument, Derek, of even more reason to go make a splash, right? So I don't think you can ever look at a team that's right there, that's a back-to-back playoff team that's up and coming, and say, it's not time to make a splash. And Green Bay clearly felt that way. They went out and did make a splash. And again, your mileage may vary on how big of a splash that you think that is. But when you go and spend $120 million on 2 4-year contracts for a corner and an offensive lineman, that's an aggressive offseason. Regardless of how you want to view it, that is an aggressive offseason. So they clearly felt like they made a splash. And those are hopefully going to be 2 big-time players for Green Bay. Hopefully they can get to the level that they need to get to. So this is an interesting one, Ben. Looking at our roster, we don't really need 8 picks. If you go through our roster, and maybe I can do this just really quick. I've done this before. Here are the players that I think are quote unquote locks to make the team. All right. Love, Willis, Jacobs, Lloyd. We'll just say one more running back. I think either Wilson or Brooks is probably there, right? So that's 5. Dobbs, Reed, Wicks, 8. Walker, 9. Banks is 10. Jenkins is 11. Sean Ryan is 12. Jordan Morgan is 13. Zach Tom is 14. Kraft is 15. Musgrave is 16. Gary 17. Van Ness 18. Wyatt 19. Clark 20. Brooks 21. And Igbare maybe 22. I think he makes it. I don't know if he's a lock. Quay 23. McDuffie 24. Cooper 25. Hopper 26. Valentine 27. Oladapo 28. McKinney 29. Williams 30. Bullard 31. Nixon 32. Hobbs 33. Whalen 34. McManus 35. Orzik 36. 36 players that are probably like, I don't even know if you want to put Orzik in there, to be honest, but unless they get another long snapper, he's probably a lock. 36 quote unquote locks. 17 spots up for grabs. Now they have 17 guys already that are capable of taking those spots, but only 36 locks. If you want to create more competition, by all means, go create more competition. They have room to add as many talented players as they can get. And you don't know where those draft picks are going to come. They might end up with, of those 8 draft picks, maybe 3 don't make the team, but you don't know which ones are going to be the good ones until you get them in. So I think there's plenty of room. I'm not concerned over it. And I think if anything, competition is good for training camp. All right, most in Minnesota. And when do we get our deep dives on draft prospects? The anticipation is killing me. Awesome stuff as always every day, Andy. Thanks for the hard work. You're getting some good ones already from Ross Uglum. So here's just the thing, just to give you a little bit of backstory here, most state of Minnesota. And when I did just deep dives on draft prospects, people would get, I think, a little bit burnt out at times and just be like, all right, I'm ready for the draft just to get here already. Or I wish we were talking about other stuff other than just the draft. So I love the draft, but not everyone is in that same realm. I mean, even people on my podcast team are like, can I take the draft off because it's not my cup of tea? So I would see numbers sort of fall during that time frame. Now, I'm still going to do a good chunk of deep dives. Don't get me wrong, just like I did last year. But the reason I brought Ross on is to cover the daily draft so that you're getting these prospect, deep-ish dives every single day so that the people who want to nerd out about the draft still have that avenue, while we can also talk about Packers on the daily without having to do quite as many deep dives. Because before, like, I had to start mid-March and then they went over a month. And again, people would just get burnt out by it. So I just kind of made the educated decision. Let's let Ross do a lot of these, prospect videos. I'll kind of continue this into probably April. And then once April comes, we'll start doing a few more deep dives at that point in time. They trade down for 10 or 12 picks. Do they even have room for them on the roster? We just touched that on John. The youngest team in NFL history to win a playoff game in a couple years ago. Packers are just cracking the window and it should only keep going. I love that thought process, King Kermit. I'm fearful that Christian Watson will try to come back too soon in a contract year and get hurt again. Would he consider a Jordan Love-like 4th-year deal so he doesn't need to rush back? I don't think he's going to do that. I would be more concerned that, just when he does come back, that, it's just going to take some time for him to ramp up. I think he'll take it. I don't think he's going to rush back. I really don't. He understands that he's going to be a free agent after this year. And I think he'll take it at with the time that he needs. And then it's just, how close to 100% is he when he actually comes back from injury? Do you think that there was a bit of an identity crisis last year? It felt like we went from a heavy pass offense for years to a heavy run offense. All of a sudden, it didn't seem in sync on times. Defensively, I thought they looked more in sync than they have in a long time. Offensively, I thought there were times where they were very disjointed. I think Jordan's injury did play a huge factor in that, though. And bringing in Josh Jacobs and just going through some moving parts in real time, it just felt a little less connected than it had in previous Matt LaFleur seasons. So I think there definitely is a piece of that, Jason. I think Matt LaFleur wants to run heavy offense. It's just hard to make an O-line that can handle the job. Hopefully they did so this offseason. Other than Zach Tom, is there anyone from the 2022 draft who definitely should get a second long-term contract? Not yet. Zach Tom is the clear and obvious one. I think Quay will get an extension. I really, really do. I think just based on how they talk about him, I think Quay will get an extension. I think Wyatt gets maybe that 1 year sort of compromise. But actually, I don't even know. Wyatt might say no and just hit free agency instead, because he'll get a big contract in free agency because he's a former first-round pick who's played some good football. So that one's interesting. Watson maybe gets a 1 year sort of prove it just to stay in Green Bay and then can hit hopefully a big contract year the year after that. Sean Ryan will have a chance to earn it. I don't think Romeo Doubs gets an extension. Enigbare might get like a 1 or 2 if it's cheap enough, but he's in a really interesting spot this year. And then Rasheed Walker will have to earn it this year as well. So Zach Tom is the one that's clearly on top of mind there. Just very odd that they draft bigger ends to help with the run, but besides this year, they've been historically bad at run defense. But that hasn't always been the edge rushers. The edge rushers have done, I think, a pretty solid job setting the edge. A lot of times it's been the Dean Lowrys, the Tyler Lancasters, and some of the interior run defenders and the linebackers as well have been, I think, and really the secondary as well. Now they actually have a good run defending secondary, and that's helping things a lot. I feel like the only real starter we needed to add in the offseason was at edge. Instead, we spent big to push solid, decent starters in Valentine and likely Morgan to the bench. Were they luxury in free agency? I understand the thinking. I do. I'm totally fine with, by the way, Valentine having to earn stuff moving forward. I think you saw in the Dallas Goedert play last year, like there are still deficiencies in his game. And I think there are ways to upgrade that. And this is a team that you need to have, just in general in defense, you need to have tacklers out on the field. And now they actually do in the secondary. Like they've got Williams, Bullard, Xavier McKinney, Keyshawn Nixon, and Hobbs now. Like they've got dogs out there that will go and attack the football. I think that's really exciting from a defensive standpoint. Valentine struggles with that. And then on the offensive line, I think they got better, and you need 6. There's no luxury there. Like you have to have 6 starting offensive linemen. You're going to need them throughout the course of the year. So maybe a little bit, but and I understand the thought process. But I can also understand it from Green Bay's point of view and what they were doing there. I think if Quay was really starting to click, it just opens up on the Cooper Rush packages. Cooper Rush, not the quarterback, the Cooper Blitz packages. And this linebacker core will be insane. I'm on White and Walker's side. I hope they can get them signed this offseason. Totally cool with that, King Kermit. I get wanting to be 6 deep at O-line and maybe not trusting Nixon and Valentine. There, you were right on the same page, Will. But it feels like now our draft will need to be even more position dependent on D-line and wide receiver. Maybe, I think, again, wide receiver, they can make some moves during offseason or cut down time and maybe even at the trade deadline. I think we forget, like, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd is still a really good core of weapons. With Matt LaFleur as your coach, who is really great at scheming stuff up, Jordan at quarterback, who I think will bounce back in a significant way when he's healthy, and a better offensive line, there's still a lot of weapons there. A lot of weapons that teams would love to have. Would you love that 1A wide receiver? No question about it. There's still a ton of weapons there. I think Green Bay's still in a good spot. As a Beavers fan, go Catan over Anderson. Fair enough. Sorry, disagree there. Go Ducks between the two. Fair enough. I may be the minority, but I ride the Beavers. They had cooler colors before the Ducks started coming out with all the heat alternatives. No hate, though, unless they play that week. Oregon over the rest any day of the week. Little Oregon battle here. I would like the Packers to keep Alexander and resolve the issue he has with the front offices. Understand it. Just really don't expect it. Do you think this was Goody's plan going into free agency? I wonder if Green Bay had to pivot after getting priced out early. It's possible. Again, these are the tough things to sort of just have conjecture on, right? Because I would just be making stuff up as much as you guys would. Maybe they had to pivot. Maybe this was their plan all along. I can guarantee you when Goody talks, he's going to tell us that it was his plan all along, but tough to say. Tough to say for sure. Well, I'm living a contradiction, though, because Badgers are my main team, but I like Michigan. Yeah, you're all over the place, Ben. That's all over the place. Pick a team, my friend. Do you think that was Goody's plan going into free agency? All right, so Lee, we touched base on that. I wish I had a better answer for you, but those are it's just tough to kind of glean at this point, right? Luka's got 29 points already. What are we at halftime? 29 points, 7 rebounds, 9 of 15, 5 of 9 from 3, and it's only halftime. Way to D up Bucks. Yeah, Luka's special, though. What can you do? Let's see. If you take away each of their best players, Love, McDuffie from the 2020 and 2021 draft, which is worse, I'd still go 2021 because at 20, at least they had JRJ and Dylan who did some good things, but man, that rest of the draft is rough. Yeah, both of them are tough. I think you're probably right. It's probably 2020, and obviously Love puts it over the top, but at 2015, 2021, some really rough drafts there. Should Pittsburgh go after Cousins? I don't know that Cousins is going anywhere. That's a weird situation. You kind of put LA Rams as the favorite for who? For Aaron? Stafford's not going anywhere at this point. Maybe I'm missing the conversation though. Can't forget they signed a high-end kicker, meaning McManus. Yeah, if you're talking about the offseason for Green Bay, absolutely. I'm sorry, I know I'm getting to some of these conversations a little bit later. Ralph Bold prediction: in 10 years from now, we will say we held on to the GM too long, like defensive coaches. He doesn't roll the dice. He's very stubborn. I disagree with that. There's things that Goody needs to do better. I don't think there's anything that has been remotely fireable as of yet, even remotely. The first round picks need to get better, no question about it. There's reasons to be, there's reasons that, to be critical and to want a little bit more. Totally understand that. I don't think there's anything that you can point to and say this is grounds for firing for Goody. I think that'd be a very, very tough call. And I think you'd get a GM job immediately if he ended up getting fired in Green Bay. Agree with the old teams needing more. I think Goody is showing what he can do now that everything is under his control. No contracts or obligations to players of old. Love was the first step. Could see that. Thought Wicks was the second best after Watson in run blocking. Fair. I like I said, I thought Wicks was the best. PFF apparently thought so as well. Jonah Jackson received 1-year extension and is guaranteed his $17 million now for the season and $17 million for next. That'll be Sean Ryan's starting point if he plays the same as he did last year. You're probably right, Mike. Probably very right. Is the plan to have Justice on every week? It is. 50. Yes, every week. I'm so tired, guys. 52 weeks a year. Yes. I was trying to think why I was thinking 53-man roster is what I had in my head. I'm all over the place. We won 11 games. Yeah. Like I said, I'm all over the place. Sorry. Very tired. We won 11 games and lost 6-7 to 14-win teams. Don't think that's ever happened before in history. We're on the rise. Go Pack, go. Well, again, love the optimism here, guys. Can we all hope Las Vegas takes Genty so the Bears can't? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not super concerned. The Bears will find a running back in this draft class. Like, it's a really good running back draft class. So they're going to find somebody. And if Chicago wants to spend a first round pick on a running back, I don't know that I'm going to be super upset by it, to be honest. I'm not sure Genty will be an all-time great in the NFL. I'm excited to go and watch him a little bit more in detail. Thought we needed to add star power this offseason to move the needle and not only compete for a Super Bowl, but to move past the Vikings and Lions in our division. Fan of Goot, but a little disappointed. Not sure if you were here at the beginning, Jason, but I probably went on about a 15-minute answer in regards to this. So recommend going back and watching that. Understand it for sure. I think there's a lot of people, myself included, that maybe we're hoping for just a little bit more, but still like some of the stuff that they did. Not completely sold on Detroit, Minnesota being much improved this season. I think that's fair, Ben. Not playing superb defense, but Bucks are still up at half. Didn't expect. Oh, they're still up with that? That's crazy. Thinking outside the box, is there any blocking tight end or someone like Josiah DeGuara that they could have on free agency that is a blocking specialist you would want? H-back tight end blocking specialist. Yeah, I looked at that a little bit. There's not. I think you could look at the draft. I think they probably bring back Fitzpatrick, and I still think there's something there in Ben Sims, but they could. I think they could still go get a Mercedes Lewis if they wanted to. I think he's a free agent, but yeah, I think Hunter Long was the guy that I was looking at there, and he signed for a pretty cheap deal. There just isn't really that guy out there, but haven't had the chance to look at the draft too much yet from a run blocking standpoint. Perry and Grant should be on Monday. I know I talked to Grant already. He should be good to go for Sunday night. I haven't had a chance to talk to Perry yet, but they should be here on Monday's show. Only up by 8. Yeah, I'll take it. With Luka playing like that, I'll absolutely take up by 8. Remember that time the Vikings didn't get their pick in time and then it happened again in the 2025 draft? That'd be fun. A lot of conspiracy theories that would come out about that with the draft being in Green Bay. That's for sure. I'm all for it. All right, guys, I'm losing my voice a little bit. I think that's all the questions. Went a little bit longer today, but it was well worth it. Appreciate all the great questions. Appreciate your guys' memberships and signing up and supporting the channel. It means a ton. I'll be back tomorrow for happy hour at 3:00 p.m. I will see you guys then. But until next time, and as always, go Pack, go.